There are 8 viewers waiting, so, okay, so now you are live. They should be able to see you.
Early crowd, welcome.
Right. Why is my picture up there? Oh, it's the view. You can all change your views here as well. You don't have to see my last year's fall beard. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us. We have folks joining regularly here. Please tell us where you're joining from and what's your favorite part of Halloween or fall? Let's put it that way. What's your favorite part of fall? Mine is football, leaves, and Halloween, and all the candy and goodies that come with all that. All right, Peter, looks like we're streaming. Hello, Maria. Welcome. Welcome. The weather. Hillary, are you talking about like the crunchy leaves, sweatshirt, hoodie weather? Tennessee, North Carolina, the comfort food. Blythe, I'm feeling that. Here in Minnesota, everything, all comfort food is tots. Hey, lacrosse, fellow cheeseheads, welcome. Yes, the Colorama, Bemidji. Oh, I bet it's just gorgeous there. It's so nice in the cities here and just getting out. Yeah, trick or treating. Oh, is that a thing this year? Is that happening? Does anyone know? Are we doing a distance like a parade style from a float style trick or treating? Just you walk by on the sidewalk and houses throw things at you. You'll really hate the people giving out apples this year. The sky, the leaves. Oh, there it is. Pumpkin spice from Blaine. Thank you, Cassandra from Blaine, and the pumpkin spice thing.
Canada. Hello, Canada.
Canada. Welcome, eh? Has anyone seen the new Adam Sandler movie on Netflix, the Hubie Halloween? It's just brilliant. If you like Adam Sandler, it's vintage Sandler, and it's kind of a greatest hits of characters and names, but it's new and it's fun. And he has an imaginary girlfriend from Canada. She's from Canada, Ontario, which way up there you probably couldn't find her.
If you're hard, if you have a presenter like flake out on you or get sick, you can just run it on Friday, right? Just sub it in.
Yep. We could put that in there. And no spoilers here. There's some gems of quotes in that movie. I'm just going to say, and no spoilers, but I think my new canned response, this one person kind of just berates Adam Sandler's character. And his response with his thermos is, okay, would you like some soup? I think that's how I'm going to respond to people from now on. If they're being ridiculous, okay, would you like some soup? Soup's a fair trade, right? Masks on. Trick-or-treating is on. Okay, in Jersey. Knows pumpkin spice in Shoreview. What is that, the tiny town from Footloose? They all know dancing too? Just kidding. I like Shoreview. That's where my Trader Joe's is. Yes, you have to check that out. Okay, would you like some soup? Oh, 90% working on updates. Thank you, Windows. Gas is on the right. Kick it down. Welcome, everyone. Apple cider. I was waiting for that one. Thank you, Cindy. I am an apple cider person. I love that.
Oh, Zach Dorholt tormenting me from up north.
Hey, it's Dave from Stearns County Jail and the whole crew.
So Zach Dorholt is a psychotherapist up for Centricare, working in the jail and the clinic. So we're partners in crime when I do work for Centricare.
Oh, nice.
And Kat apparently is maybe imitating him. I don't know. It said nope, Kat. Kat Stanfus.
Welcome. And Jordan, don't feel bad. I'm not sure what we're talking about most of the time either, but maple flavored anything is the way to go. It's the way to go. They have maple flavored Oreos out there, which were a nice treat.
You got to work bacon in somehow.
Right? Bacon is just, you know, seasonal every season.
Oh, I see. So northern Minnesota.
Okay. Oh, bacon turkey legs. There we go. There we go. Yeah, hopefully we can do. I bought a whole bunch of candy and maybe we'll have trick-or-treaters in my new place. I don't know. I don't know how it'll work here. I still like the float style. I'm just gonna go throw candy at people dressed up. You're welcome. Happy Halloween.
Like you
For
could use a slingshot, shoot it at the street.
right. Oh, when I was coming home from the store the other day, this truck almost T-boned me again. This has been happening lately. People running lights at me. And I, you know, after I caught my breath a few moments later, it was when I was driving home with all this candy I was talking about. I was like, I could just see the news. And a vehicle struck a pinata this afternoon. There was a person in said pinata. Now I'm thinking about bacon and candy. How do we wrap candy with bacon? I'm sure it's a thing. I'm sure it's out there. Wonder Woman handing out goodies. Pecan and apple pie. Thank you for sharing, Maria. State Fair next year. What's coming, Megan? Oh, sprinkle brown sugar. I love it. Oh, okay. Chocolate covered bacon on a stick. Of course, it's on a stick because it's at the Minnesota Fair. Well, it looks like, jeepers, let me get the standard view here. Why is my camera on? There we go. I'm hiding participants. And are we about ready to go here?
I'm ready. You tell me when you're ready.
All right. Well, it's 12 o'clock noon, and welcome everybody to our free monthly webinar series on this fine Friday here in Minnesota, at least in the cities. It's beautiful, which we host on the second Friday of each month from noon to 1 Central Time. Today's topic is Be Here Now, Self-Care During a Pandemic, with our presenter and friend of the center, Dr. David Frenz, to whom I'll give the floor in just a few moments. Good afternoon, everyone. Glad to see you all coming here. Kim, welcome. Welcome in the team. Matt, I hope Matt's still upright, not eating anything funny. Again, we're just thrilled at the overwhelming show of support you've shown us each and every presentation here for some time, especially during COVID. We love hearing about your experience with us, and to whomever needs to hear it today, yes, you are appreciated. I know I appreciate you. And I promise you'll hear less of me after just a few quick notes. We'd like to welcome everyone joining us via live stream on YouTube today. We're glad you could join us. Peter, how many folks do we have joining us on YouTube? Peter?
We have 20 at the moment.
Sweet, welcome all 20 of you at the moment. And if you don't mind, please hit subscribe. If we get 1,000 subscribers, we can broadcast and give access to 1,000 more of you wonderful folks for free. So it's a free access thing. There's no cost. This is what we're trying to do. You will receive an email from me with the link to your eval and post test for CEU credit by about 4 o'clock Central Time today. Gives us just a little bit of time to do our nerd thing behind the curtain, so to speak. Dr. Frenz's PowerPoint slides will be attached, so you'll have access to those right away. And we'll have the link to today's recording. So it'll all be neat, tied up nice and neat in a little box for you, except that box is an email. Please use Firefox or Explorer to navigate this process. Google Chrome and Safari are not as compatible. If you're using those, then this is not for you. Sometimes they don't play well with other items. You will have 1 week to complete the eval and post test. So that'll be next Friday, October 16th at 5 p.m. And if anyone, such as Kim up there, is watching with staff or coworkers, please send me an email with their names and email address, so we can make sure we include them in my email blast after with the links for CEU credit and all that fun stuff. Past webinars are archived on our website, Practice Transformation at umn.edu, after about a week, and you'll be able to purchase them for $25 for one CEU if you're not joining us live here. Yes, you are all muted. I bet you wish you could mute me once in a while. I'll be done in a moment. Everyone participating will be automatically added to our mail list. You may submit questions anytime in the Q&A box, which is in the lower taskbar of your Zoom room here, this Zoom space. Let's keep the questions in the Q&A and, you know, the witty banter and everything over in the chat if we can, or either or. We'll have a few minutes at the end of the presentation for David to answer any questions you may have. And David, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Well, it's always a pleasure to be here. I am a friend of the center, a longtime friend of the center. Here to talk today about ourselves. Usually when I'm presenting for the center, we're talking about clinical care, how to take care of patients and clients. And this is a little bit of a spin. I'm going to talk mainly about ourselves, how to take care of ourselves during the pandemic, but more broadly, times of personal and social crisis. My disclosures, I don't have any disclosures. They're at the very end of my slide deck. No financial disclosures to make, nothing crazy there. But if you want to see it in writing, it's at the very end of my slide deck. Joe's going to give you my slide deck. You can also find it on my website. I always have it under the news tab on my website. So drfrenz.com, doctor spelled out. The news tab is this presentation as well as all the other ones I've been making. All right, so let's wind into the presentation here. I am struggling though to advance my screen, Joe. Oh, there we go. All right, so the Minneapolis Skyway is pretty abandoned right now. I'm like living in a ghost city. I'm actually in my office downtown on the 14th floor of a medical building, but this is in the Skyway, and it's kind of an apt metaphor for today, but also for the work that we're doing. So why are we gathered here today? Well, we're here together to collectively get through this thing called life from Prince. This was something you used to hear. I don't know who's been traveling by airplane lately. I certainly haven't been on one for a long time, but this is a standard safety announcement. This is from Delta's safety announcement. And as you recall, you know, when you pay attention to these things, you're supposed to adjust your own oxygen mask before helping others, which again is the focus of this presentation. It's hard for us to help others and be effective for others when we're not doing well ourselves. So this is our time, our hour to think about how to put on our own masks so that we can more effectively help others. This is silly, but not silly. It's a fair question that I have for patients. You know, are you happy? Well, you know, some of my patients are, you know, usually I've been seeing them for years. If so, just keep doing whatever you're doing. Now, a lot of new patients are not happy. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in my office. So they're not happy. Do you want to be happy? Seems like a silly question, but I'm not convinced that everybody truly wants to be happy. They're miserable, but they haven't really declared that they want to be happy. So I guess if you're not happy and you don't want to be happy, just keep doing whatever you're doing. But there is a subset clearly of people who are unhappy and they want to be happy and they have to change something. And sometimes we as clinicians have to change things in our personal life. This is a book that is pretty much the Bible, I think, on the happiness research. So Daniel Gilbert is a psychologist at Harvard University. He's dedicated probably his entire career to studying happiness. Do not quickly order this on Amazon before listening to the rest of what I have to say. This book will not tell you how to be happy. What Gilbert does is he systematically rounds up all the literature on happiness and demolishes our usual beliefs about happiness. So humans have a lot of beliefs about what makes them happy or unhappy, and Gilbert sort of plows through all the literature and says, you know what, pretty much all the things that you believe about happiness are just not true. And so it's a great read. I wouldn't discourage you from reading this, but don't think that there's like a chapter at the very end saying, here's how to do it. But if you want to know about what won't work, it's a good read. From the book, most of us spend much of our time turning rudders, hoisting sails, only to find out that happiness, Shangri-La, isn't what and where we thought it would be. That's sort of the Twitter summary of his book. And it's amply supported. Tons of research, psychological research, examining strategies toward pursuing happiness and why they don't tend to work very well. Now, a lot of our unhappiness has to do with time, which is a really interesting construct. And so it's our relationship with time that often makes us unhappy. And I'm going to sort of get into the gist of this in a number of slides. Psychologists have certainly looked at this a lot, and I'm going to present what I think is a fairly brilliant study on our relationship with time and how it makes us unhappy. But if you sort of look at the mystical literature, if you want to call it that, mystics have believed the same thing, that an unhealthy relationship with time tends to make us unhappy, profoundly unhappy. Psychologically, time is sort of this non-entity. It's just sort of a way that we demark events that have occurred to our life. So really the only thing that we have to work with is now. There's really just the eternal now. Things that occurred before now we call the past. Things that we anticipate happening after this moment now we call the future. But it's a psychological construct. It's just, again, a way that we demark time. More importantly, it's a way that we demarcate time in our head. I mean, there were real events that happened in my life prior to now, and there's presumably going to be some real events that happen this afternoon after now. But the mind has an interesting way of going into the past and future. And in fact, a lot of the things that we visit in the past and future weren't even real events. And that's really where a lot of our unhappiness comes from. Eckhart Tolle, super good read, Power of Now. Was a life-changing read for me. First appeared in 1997. It was sort of a sleeper bestseller by an obscure publisher in Canada. Speaking of Canada, sleeper bestseller. He was probably one of the first ones, and I hesitate to use this word without defining it. He was probably one of the first mindfulness books out there, big mindfulness books out there. And he points out this: nothing ever happened in the past. It happened now. And then it becomes the past. Nothing will ever happen in the future. It will happen in the now when we reach it. And so again, it's a psychological construct. It's something that our mind has made up. But really the only moment that we have to work with is right now. Jan Chosen-Bayes, pediatrician. When we aren't present, it makes us feel vaguely and persistently dissatisfied, unhappy. This sense of dissatisfaction, the gap between us and everything and everyone else, is the essential problem of human life. And so the dissatisfaction, she argues, and I think there's ample support for this scientifically as well as experientially, not being present now creates a lot of unhappiness or dissatisfaction. And so therefore, remaining present in the now is a strategy, very viable strategy for improving our happiness. So I've read a lot of studies. I'm 50 and I teach evidence-based medicine at the University of Minnesota. I've easily seen thousands of studies in my life, possibly tens of thousands of studies in my life. This is in my top 5 for sure. It's possibly the #1 study in terms of how brilliantly it was designed, how well it was executed, and more importantly, how practical the implications of the study were. And the thing that's crazy about it, it's one printed page in Science, the major journal. So one page in Science, a single page, kind of an earth-shattering result. So Daniel Killingsworth was the author. He was the primary author, primary investigator, and his partner was his thesis advisor, Daniel Gilbert. So this was a Harvard-based study for Killingsworth's PhD. And the question they had was, I wonder what happens in people's everyday lives. This has been historically a hard thing to study, but Killingsworth has a tech background. He had a tech background before he produced his PhD, and he said, well, you know what? And this was kind of early in the smartphone era. Everybody's carrying around these smartphones. This allows us to ping people in real time and figure out what they're doing and how they're feeling. And so it was a real-time, real-world experience sampling study. Prior to smartphones, this was really hard to do. You would put people in laboratories. It was a very artificial environment. It didn't resemble real life in any way, shape, or form. So this was a really novel sort of way of doing it. They enrolled a bunch of people, 2,000 people. And the people were randomly pinged during waking hours via iPhone, and they were supposed to answer a survey on their iPhone as quickly as they could. Now, if they were in a dangerous situation like driving a car or cutting down a tree with a chainsaw or something like that, they were supposed to defer answering the survey, but they were really supposed to do it in real time so that the researchers could figure a few things out. One of the high-level questions is, how are you feeling right now? This was a scaled item: 0, awful; 100, ecstatic. So that was sort of the boundary, and it was a slider. You could slide the slider on the screen to pick the number that you wanted. What are you doing right now? And there was 22 activity options. And then finally, are you thinking about something other than what you are currently doing? AKA, is your mind wandering? So are you dialed into whatever is going on right now in the now, or is your mind somewhere else? Is it wandering? Past, present, future? Are you thinking of bad stuff, good stuff, etc.? So here's what they found. They had like 250,000 data points. It was a monster study. They found that about half the time, people's minds were wandering. So when they pinged people in real time and people answered the survey on their smartphone, about half the time people said, yeah, my mind is wandering. And it occurred in almost every activity to a great degree. So at least a third of the time, regardless of activities, people's minds were wandering, except one activity. So that I guess makes sense, probably appropriate. But every other activity, at least a third of the time, people's minds were wandering. So a lot of mind wandering, and the activity didn't matter. This is their results. So on the x-axis, this is how happy people were. So 0 is over here, not happy. 100 would be over here. So that's the happiness scale on X. And then there was an activity component. We'll just start there. So the top half, top 2/3 is activities. The size of the bubble refers to how much time people spend doing those activities. So sex, pretty small, not much time is spent doing that. The only thing that people do less is pray, worship, or meditate, which kills me. I'm going to get to that in a subsequent slide. But people, are very, very happy when they're having sex, 90 out of 100 in terms of having sex. Now you have to ask yourself, who the heck would answer the survey while they're having sex? But that's a different methodological problem. On the lower end, people spend a lot of time working. So it's the biggest bubble. Biggest activity bubble is working, but happiness is below average. The orange line on the screen is average happiness, 65 out of 100. So we spend a ton of our lives working, but it's typically not happy time. And none of these are, off the chart. People like exercising, I guess. I wouldn't be one of those people, but people like exercising. But this is sort of the spread. Now, the other thing they looked at was whether or not minds were wandering. And as I mentioned, half the time, people's minds were wandering. So here's the half of the time when minds were wandering. Here's the other half when people were present now. And you can sort of see that people's happiness is maximized when their mind is not wandering. So when their mind is not wandering, you have above average happiness, and it's like above average almost in terms of every activity except a few. So being present right now, highest happiness. Now, when your mind is wandering, it's really a crapshoot. It's a total gamble. And so, sometimes it's okay. Your mind might be wandering and it'd be pleasant mind wandering, but it never exceeds being present now. And then this is where the gamble comes in. Neutral mind wandering is below average happiness. And then a lot of time it's unpleasant mind wandering, like profoundly unpleasant mind wandering. So that was a super huge finding, activity as well as what people's minds are doing. All right, high level conclusions from this study. People's minds wandered frequently, and it was regardless of what they were doing. So the activity was almost irrelevant. You could be doing virtually anything and your mind may be wandering half the time. The nature of activities had only modest impact on whether minds wandered and had almost no impact on the pleasantness of the topics to which their mind wandered. So again, you could have neutral mind wandering, pleasant or unpleasant mind wandering. Again, there's not a big relationship here between activities and the type of mind wandering. People were less happy when their minds were wandering compared to when they were not. And I showed you that from the bubbles. And then what people were thinking was a better predictor of their happiness than what they were doing. Now that is a huge conclusion that I think is just worth reflecting on, because outside of the classroom, outside of this presentation, most humans don't believe that. And this is where a lot of the pathology for our patients, but also ourselves, comes from. So what people were thinking was a better predictor of their happiness than what they were doing. And then the final conclusion, again, the Twitter summary for this paper could be: a human mind is a wandering mind, and a wandering mind is an unhappy mind. The ability to think about what is not happening is a cognitive achievement that comes at an emotional cost. So we have a dog, we love our dog. I don't think our dog can mind wander. I think she's right here, right now, and therefore she's probably pretty happy compared to humans. So humans have this ability to be somewhere else than now, but that cognitive achievement, which is useful in a lot of ways, is also the source of a lot of our unhappiness or our suffering. Now, if you don't believe this study, and I'm an empiricist, let's reproduce it. Matthew Killingsworth has created an app. This is the extension study. So you can track your happiness. That's what it's called, the Track Your Happiness Study. You can download the app. It's free. And you can study your own happiness. You can reproduce the study and see if it's true for you. And I've done this a few times, and it's interesting. And I would say for me, it's reproducible. It does ring true. I'll show you in a subsequent slide in a particular way that it was true for me. But you can certainly download this, and it will ping you at an interval that you specify during hours that you specify. It's not that you'll be pinged at 3 in the morning. So you set the guardrails, and you fill it out 50 times, and then you get a happiness report. And I think it's pretty interesting. I think you may learn things about yourself. I would encourage you to do this. All right, let's go back to the high-level studies here. Now, I'm primarily going to talk about mindfulness, so to speak, but I think the slide that I presented right here should ring a bell. This is straight up CBT. So thoughts produce emotions, thoughts produce behaviors. That's straight up CBT. The type of CBT I do is REBT, rational emotive behavior therapy. That is exactly the way the model works. And so I think this study, even though kind of the high level interpretation by a lot of people is a mindfulness sort of spin on the study, I think on the flip side, there's ample evidence from this study that CBT is true, that your thoughts produce emotions, and it really doesn't matter what you're doing at the time. And people have a hard time believing this. I've tried to set my children off on the right foot, and it doesn't seem to work. Maybe it has to do with my parenting skills, but we're led to believe that things make us feel a particular way, and even bad therapists reinforce that. When that happened, how did it make you feel? Is often said, as if you have no agency. Really, what's going on is when that happened, how did you make yourself feel? That's sort of the CBT spin on it, and that's what's going on here. Your thoughts produce emotions and or behaviors. So, running with the CBT thing here, Maurice Nicoll was a psychiatrist in the mid 1900s. I mean, amazing guy. He's kind of obscure, but amazing. I just can't get enough of his stuff. But he points this out, which I think we all know to be true. He said, well, you'll agree with me that sometimes a person who is in a good external situation in life, they have enough money, their surroundings are pleasant, they don't have any serious troubles, they're unhappy and miserable. And on the other hand, a person with very different and even adverse circumstances is often quite the reverse. So again, he's getting at this deal that our circumstances don't necessarily create our happiness. Events don't necessarily create our happiness. It's going to be our thinking about events. So he had this to say, one's life consists not only of events, the external stuff of our life, but states. States are inner and events are outer. And there's not a great correlation often between those things. So he was on this already in the mid 1940s, before CBT became a thing. So Aaron Beck and Albert Ellis started to do their work kind of in the 50s and 60s. So Nicoll was already on this. So one's inner state may correspond to an external event. It may, or it may have no relationship to it at all. And again, if you fast forward to the Killingsworth-Gilbert study, they demonstrated that was true experientially. It was not what people were doing that led to happiness or unhappiness. It was what they were thinking. And then, can you say for certain that when the outer event occurs, your inner state corresponds to it? Because people have this belief, when the pandemic's over, I'll be happier. When this, that, or the other thing happens in my life, I'll be happier. And he's saying, well, can you say for certain that that's the truth? And because the reality is events only loosely correspond to states, they may not correspond at all if you look at the Killingsworth-Gilbert study. Now, we have known this for years. What people are thinking is a better predictor of their happiness than what they were doing. I mean, this is from Killingsworth and Gilbert, but we have known this for years, like millennia. So this comes from the Stoic philosophers. Epictetus was the foundation, honestly, for Albert Ellis's work with rational emotive behavior therapy. It isn't things that disturb people, but the judgments that they form about them. So it's not the pandemic per se that disturbs us. It's our judgments, it's our ideas about the pandemic. Downtown Minneapolis used to have 200,000 people working in it pre-pandemic. I mean, it's kind of ghostly and things are boarded up, buildings are boarded up and restaurants have failed, stuff like that. Those things aren't disturbing in themselves. It's the judgments that people form about those things that disturb people. Shakespeare said something similar: nothing's good or bad, thinking makes it so. So again, it's not the event, it's not the thing, it's how we think about it. John Milton from Paradise Lost: the mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell and a hell of heaven, which is again what Nickel was saying. It's like you can be in good circumstances, relatively free of adversity, but be unhappy, and then quite the opposite. And then finally, another Stoic philosopher, Marcus Aurelius, one of the emperors, Roman emperors, from his meditations: it is possible to form no opinion on this matter and not be troubled in your mind. Things themselves are not of such a nature that they can create judgments within us. So again, it's not the event, the thing, the external circumstance, it's our thinking about the thing. And so although the Killingsworth Gilbert study gets a lot of attention for mindfulness, and I'm going to proceed with that definitely, I think it gives a lot of weight to what we know about CBT, believe about CBT. It is not the activity that we're engaged in that creates happiness or unhappiness. It's what's going on in our head. It's the mind wandering and our thoughts about these things. All right, so that's sort of the CBT findings of this study. So that's the CBT bubbles. Thinking leads to unhappiness. Let's talk about mind not wandering. And so when you think about our understanding of human happiness, or the so-called waves of psychotherapy, the first wave was sort of Freud and Jung, the so-called first wave, which was drive theory. CBT, cognitive strategies, was sort of the second wave. So Aaron Beck, Albert Ellis, CBT. The so-called third wave would be like mindfulness-based strategies, acceptance-based strategies. And I think that's what this study also alludes to. And so mind not wandering seems to produce above average happiness. So what can we do with that as humans? Well, first, I think we have to define mindfulness. I'm always super reluctant to use the word because I think it's a slippery word. It's like anxiety. I just won't accept that word from patients because I just don't know what it means. When people say they're anxious, does that mean that they have a lot of worry? When they say they're anxious, does that mean they have autonomic arousal leading to symptoms like palpitation, sweating, tremor, things like that? I don't know what anxiety means. I have to make people define it. So mindfulness, I'm going to define in a series of slides here. So what is mindfulness? John Kabat-Zinn, fairly famous for developing mindfulness-based stress reduction, which has since been adapted in a number of different directions, including mindfulness-based relapse prevention. So how does he describe mindfulness? It's awareness. It's a great word, by the way. So it's awareness cultivated by paying attention in a sustained and particular way on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally. So you are aware of what is going on right now and you're doing so non-judgmentally. So I'm aware that there's a laptop in front of me, and I'm not forming any judgments about it. I'm just making that observation. And so that is one description of mindfulness. Jan Chosen Bays, who we used previously on a slide. So mindfulness consists of dropping thoughts. You withdraw energy from thinking and redirecting it to awareness. So again, I'm not evaluating the laptop sitting in front of me. I'm just aware of the laptop sitting in front of me. I'm not describing it. It's not good. It's not bad. It's not old. It's not slow. It's not fast. I'm just aware. And so it's a shift from thinking, evaluating, to bare awareness. That's the essence of mindfulness. Russell Harris, Australian psychiatrist. It is, again, bringing awareness to your here and now with openness, interest, and receptiveness. So again, you're not evaluating. So your mind is no longer wandering. You're not teleporting yourself into the future or the past. You're present mentally here right now. You're sort of aware of what's going on right here, right now. You're doing it really without evaluating it. You're open, you're interested, you're receptive to what's going on right now. Amishi Jha, a psychologist, it's a mental mode of being engaged in the present moment. Again, this theme continues without evaluating the present moment or emotionally reacting to it. So again, you're right here, right now, not evaluating, not reacting. Now, humans struggle to do this. I'll be the first to admit. I mean, the human mind, as you saw from the Killingsworth-Gilbert study, is a wandering mind. Half the time, people's minds wander, but there are ways that we can improve mindfulness. And in fact, we have some technology that can help us do that. We can improve our mindfulness through meditation, but also the use of tools that keep us anchored in the now. And one such tool is called Muse. Now, this is not actually how you use it. It's an interesting photograph, but it's not actually how you use it. It's a meditation device, so she should probably be sitting somewhere with her eyes closed, but that's a far less interesting, it's a far less interesting photo. She looks like she's, putting this on and getting ready for a run. That's not how you would use this. But what this is, it is a electroencephalogram. It's a surface electroencephalogram. And there are 3 sensors here on the forehead, and then there's a sensor by each ear. So 5 inputs. And what it does, just like a clinical EEG that you use to assess people for seizure disorder, it monitors what's going on inside your head. And it gives you a sense for whether or not your mind is wandering. And there's feedback. It's a biofeedback device. This is a form of biofeedback called neurofeedback, but there's an app on your phone, of course. It's a Bluetooth device, and it tells you what's going on in your head, and you get auditory feedback. And so when your mind is wandering a lot and quite active, the rain, you can set some soundscapes. The one I use is rain. So in my soundscape, when my mind is wandering, the rain is hard. And when my mind is fairly neutral, the rain is softer. And then when my mind is calm, the rain is very soft or absent, and you hear birds chirping. And so this is an adjunct to meditation. There's a lot of ways to meditate, but mindfulness meditation is just making yourself aware of the present, often using a device like focusing on your breath. So this biofeedback device helps you stay anchored in the now, because when your mind starts wandering, you get an auditory cue to bring yourself back to the present. So here's what it actually looks like. These are actual sessions that I've done. My standard session is 20 minutes. And again, it's monitoring my brain. And on the left, my mind was wandering a fair amount. And so there was a fair amount of activity. So I was, 14 out of 20 minutes, I was sort of in this active zone, very little in the neutral zone, and very, very little in the calm zone. Not a whole lot of birds were heard during that session. So here's another session over here where things were pretty calm. There was no active moments. There was a little bit of neutral, not a lot, but most of it was spent down here. And actually, I love it when this happens, you know, where I'm sort of brain dead, where it's just absolutely still or quiet. So again, big picture, we can bring ourselves back to the now and therefore maximize our happiness through training. This is like almost like exercise for your brain. You exercise, you know, for 20 minutes a day, an hour a day to make the rest of your hours better. This is again a form of mental exercise to make the rest of your life better. Here's another biofeedback device called HeartMath. This is again not how you would typically use it. I mean, he's wearing the device properly, but he should have a device in front of his face. He should have a smartphone. He should be looking at his smartphone. So this is how it works. This is an oximeter probe that attaches to your earlobe. Here's a Bluetooth transmitter sending a signal to the phone, and it looks at something called heart rate variability, what your heart rate is doing. And it's very hard to see, but I'll show you a smartphone on a subsequent slide. There's a breath timer, and you can set the breath timer at any pace that is comfortable for you. And what you do is you follow the breath timer on your screen. It goes back and forth, and you breathe in and breathe out with the breath timer. So you're very focused on now. And when you're really, really dialed in, focusing on now, your heart rate variability settles down. So here's some screenshots again from HeartMath. And so heart rate variability here is pretty chaotic, a lot of choppiness, mostly in the red zone. You're shooting for mostly stuff in the green, choppy down here again. And so heart rate variability in this particular session wasn't fantastic, although I would say it wasn't awful. Over here, I did better, you know, so this choppiness has settled into this beautiful waveform. This is my heart rate variability over here. So it's a kind of a sinusoidal waveform. I was following the breath timer. Coherence is a way of describing how that sinusoidal pattern looks. So it was a pretty coherent pattern. Spent a lot of time in the green. So again, these are contrast, low coherence versus high coherent states. Now, again, the reality here is it's a biofeedback device that helps you stay present now. And so you can certainly meditate without technology, but I think we have tools now that help us stay present right here, right now. You get the feedback. HeartMath, not only do you get visual feedback, you're getting auditory feedback as well. That's another thing that's not entirely accurate in this picture. He should be wearing earbuds so that he's getting auditory feedback from his phone. So he should be getting visual feedback and auditory feedback on how present he is. Here's another biofeedback device, relatively new to me, so I don't have experience really to share with you, but this is a surface electromyogram, so an EMG. So it's not the needle EMG that possibly you've had for carpal tunnel syndrome. And so this is a device that monitors muscle tension. And so these little sticky things attached to the device, and then the stickies attached to you. And, you know, this is on the trapezius, supraspinatus trapezius muscle, but you can put it on other muscle groups. You know, she's facing her back toward us, but you can put it on your forehead, the frontalis muscle. So again, this is a Bluetooth enabled biofeedback device, and it's sending information on muscle tension to a smartphone. So here you go. There's a session running. This is the muscle tension down here, and you can see variability in muscle tension. And so you're getting feedback, both auditory and visual, on what's going on with your muscles. So it's a way of staying present right here, right now. All right, so what if you don't have time to check out and do biofeedback? There are things you can do to sort of break up your day. One of them is just a simple exercise, acronym SOLAR, or SOLAR. And so you can break up your day, a few minutes here, a few minutes there. So how does it work? Well, you stop and sit. You observe. Often you focus on your breathing. And you just look at, you know, what's in your immediate experience. So let it be. That's that mindfulness piece. So no evaluation, no judgment, no emotional reaction. So stop, observe, let whatever you're observing be, and then return to the present moment. You can sort of do a loop. And so you can do some simple mindfulness meditation throughout your day. It doesn't take more than a few minutes, but just break up the constant flow of thought, which, as I pointed out, 50% of the time is wandering thought, and the wandering thought tends to create unhappiness. So this is a strategy that you can use to rein yourself in, bring yourself back to the present. Now, for a lot of us, as you saw, we spent a ton of our time working, that big bubble from one of my early slides. So a lot of our life is spent working. So what are ways that you can make work more pleasant or enjoyable for yourselves? Well, one way is to get yourself sort of into a flow state. And so the person who's studied this the most, who's famous for it, is Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. And he sort of describes flow in the following way. So when you are completely focused, that creates one of the conditions for flow. There's no space for distracting thoughts. So again, we're not wandering, irrelevant feelings, judgments. Self-consciousness disappears, but you feel stronger than usual. Sense of time is distorted. Hours pass by in minutes. But you can sort of see the threads of mindfulness in here. You have no room for distraction or wandering. You're not judging things. You're just totally dialed in. What are the conditions again to create flow? Well, clear goals that require appropriate responses, immediate feedback. So a goal that you have to do something, you get immediate feedback on how you're doing. It should be challenging. Skills are fully involved in a considerable but not overwhelming challenge. It should be a stretch, but not unmanageable or overwhelming. And then there should be really no other goal than the activity itself. A lot of our activities are contingent upon the outcome. Like, I'm doing this so that this happens, and then I'll be happy. That's not the way that flow necessarily works. You have a challenge, you get feedback. It requires that you got to be fully dialed in, and the point is the activity, not the outcome of the activity. I'll tell you that the times that I've been in flow states most clearly have been in the operating room. So early in my career, I assisted a neurosurgeon with challenging spine cases, and you had to be dialed in. And so it was there was clear goals. We got immediate feedback on how we were doing. It required a lot of skill, but it was not unmanageable. And we were focused on what we were immediately doing, not the outcome for the patient a day from now, a week from now, a year from now. So here's a cartoon form of flow. So again, the challenge on Y, skill on X. And so you get all sorts of situations here. Here's the apathy and boredom options. So it's a low skill, low challenge situation. That's when we feel apathetic and bored. There's other options here, as you can see. A high challenge, low skill situation. So you're being confronted with a challenge that you do not have the skills to necessarily master. So that is going to produce anxiety and worry. This is the zone you want to be in. You want to be in a situation where there is a high challenge and high skill situation. And that is where you're most likely to find flow. You're most likely to be mindful, and therefore most likely to be happy. Reeling back to the Track Your Happiness study, this is from one of the iterations that I personally did. And you get all sorts of interesting information on yourself. And one of the outputs was, there was questions about focus that I was prompted to answer, like how focused are you right now? Like how much are you focusing on the present moment? So I had to answer a bunch of questions about that. And then there was obviously a happiness question to the study. And you can sort of see that I was happier when I was more focused. I was less likely to be happy when I was defocused. So when my mind was wandering. And so for me, at least, it was fairly true. And I guess I challenge you to do the same. Study your own happiness and see if this is in fact true of you. All right, but we're in the middle of a pandemic, and I'm in downtown Minneapolis, which has had a fair amount of rioting and property destruction, $2 billion of property destruction in Minneapolis more broadly. What are you supposed to do with all these problems? I mean, aren't there real problems in life? And I'm a realist. life has its vicissitudes. So here's from Tolle again. Your life situation may be full of problems. Most life situations are, but find out if you have a problem at this moment, now, not tomorrow, not in 10 minutes. Do you have a problem now? And I've used this therapeutically for at least 10 years with patients. So they'll be in my office and they'll tell me about their problems, and I'll say, well, but is that happening right now? And I'll sort of get a puzzled look, and I'm like, you know, I know you said your girlfriend's cheating on you, but is she cheating on you right now in my office? And the answer is no, that's never actually happened. So why are we contaminating the present with that problem? And so I'm not a denialist. I mean, that might be an issue that we have to deal with, but you're basically contaminating now with something that happened previously or may happen in the future. You're contaminating the present with that. So why do that? So I'm quick to separate out life problems, life situations from actual problems in the now, which are decidedly uncommon. If you sort of examine your own life, and that's my challenge to you, when you examine your own life, how many problems are happening right now? Now, sometimes there are problems that are happening right now, and again, I've been using this therapeutically for a long time. So if you find your here and now intolerable, there is a real problem right now, and it makes you unhappy. So I'm going to pause. So people will say, well, I have terrible back pain and it's happening right now. So they're in my office, they're unhappy, and the cause of their unhappiness is their pain in their back, and it is happening right now. So I think you have to confront that possibility. So when that is the case, you only have 3 realistic options. Remove yourself from the situation, change it, or accept it totally. Now, so I run through this. I mean, it's my 3 options tool, and I'll say, well, can we remove the back pain? No, that's been tried. Everything's been tried. Can you remove yourself from your back pain? No, everywhere I go, the back pain follows. Can we change your back pain? No, everything's been tried. You really only have one sane option left, which is to accept it totally. So again, I would challenge you, when you do have a problem right here, right now, it's happening at this moment, and it is causing disturbed emotions, run through that list. Okay, can I remove myself from the situation, like physically walk away? Nope. Can I change it in any material way? Nope. Really, your only sane option left is to accept it totally, which again is a mindfulness-based approach to dealing with it. The Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous has a ton of wisdom in it. And this was written by a physician in recovery. I've always loved it. It was titled in the 3rd edition, Dr. Alcoholic Addict. That was the title of the chapter. In the 4th edition of the Big Book, it is Acceptance Was the Answer. And so the writer observed that when they were disturbed, there was some element of non-acceptance driving it. They found some person, place, thing, or situation, some fact in my life unacceptable to me, and there was no serenity to be found until they accepted the person, place, thing, or situation as being exactly the way it was supposed to be at that moment. So he famously said acceptance was the answer later in the chapter. So there was an element of non-acceptance dealing with some feature of his life. Now this talk about self-acceptance really kind of wigs people out, because again, we're facing some challenges, and we have a big pandemic going on. We have a day of reckoning as a nation in terms of racial equality. People get really nervous. Like you're basically saying that that's okay, and I shouldn't care about those things, and I shouldn't work on solutions. That's actually not what I'm saying, because acceptance requires a definition. And so Stephen Hayes, who developed Acceptance and Commitment Therapy ACT has a lot to do with acceptance, obviously. That's the A in ACT. And so he's really careful to say psychological acceptance is not the same thing as stoicism or rationalized helplessness. The observation here is that acceptance occurs on a continuum. And it's a pretty broad continuum, and we can sort of start at the bottom. So probably the least adaptive form of acceptance is giving up resignation, and toleration. So again, I'm not advocating for that. That is a form of acceptance, but that's not an adaptive, healthy form of acceptance. But it's out there. I have to sort of acknowledge that that's a form of acceptance. Sort of a notch up from that, a more adaptive form of acceptance is you abandon a change agenda in situations where the agenda does not work. So it's sort of that old joke about insanity. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing and hoping for a different result. So he's basically saying, you know, acceptance is recognizing that attempts to change have to be suspended in this particular circumstance because they're not going to work. So that is a more adaptive form of acceptance. A yet more adaptive form of acceptance is emotional or social willingness. That is openness to one's emotions or experiences. So again, not evaluating, not judging, not reacting, a general openness to what is. Now, the what is could be something worth changing. I'm not denying that, but it's an inherent openness to what is. You're kind of not resisting what is. Resistance is sort of the opposite of what's going on. Resistance doesn't tend to be super productive. And then sort of the most adaptive form of acceptance involves some kind of made up words. He calls them deliteralization or diffusion. And basically the essence of that is seeing thoughts for what they are, not as what they say they are. So our thoughts tell us all sorts of things, but they're just thoughts. They're just ephemeral things that cross the plane of consciousness, the screen of consciousness. And so it's sort of being the observer of these things, the thinker behind the thoughts, the observer observing things. So seeing thoughts for what they are, not as what they claim to be. Here's some books I found helpful over the years. You know, I would say this is my one, you know, in terms of books. It's in my top 5, maybe it may be my number 1. Anthony DeMello, who is a psychotherapist and spiritual director, that's also an excellent read. It's actually a book he never wrote. It was a conference he gave, it was a retreat he gave, and it was recorded and transcribed. And with that, I will, Joe, entertain questions if there are any.
Great, thank you, David. We do have a few questions here. Lily says, I believe the study, and this was right at the beginning, I believe the study, but I don't know why. What people were thinking was a better predictor of their happiness than what they were doing. And then Lily responded, got it. Would you mind touching upon that?
Right. I mean, because it kind of goes back to sort of the cognitive behavioral model for how emotions are driven. So everybody believes that things make us feel a particular way. I mean, kids grow up believing that, adults continue to believe that. It's just not true. And so I'm not very far from US Bank Stadium where the Vikings play. So I'll give you an example of something I actually use in session. Let's imagine a Packers-Vikings game. They're arch enemies, arch rivals. Let's imagine that Aaron Rodgers throws a touchdown pass to Devontae Adams or whoever his receiver is, clear touchdown. Why is half the stadium upset, half the stadium elated? It's the same event. So it's a clear demonstration that it's not the event itself that makes people feel or act a particular way. It's their thoughts about the event that make them feel a particular way or behave a particular way. And so I think the Killingsworth-Gilbert study demonstrated that it's not what you were doing, it's where your mind was that drove the emotion or behavior.
Thank you, David. I was muted. And what do you mean, what if all these Packer touchdowns? You know I'm from Wisconsin, right?
Well, they're real.
They have been, yes.
They have been real. And actually, the other example I give is, you know, maybe there's somebody in the stadium who doesn't care. You know, I mean, they're just working the concession stands. They don't care about football at all. The touchdown meant nothing to them, nothing. And so again, it's our evaluation of the event, not the thing that creates the suffering.
Sure. Thank you. And thank you for the question, Lily. Denise asks, is happiness really the goal? What about satisfaction and contentment versus happiness?
Yeah, I'll take that. I mean, I'll accept that. I mean, happiness, I think, is a twisted word. It's hard. You almost have to define it, you know. So happiness for some is positive emotions. That's not really what I'm talking about here. It is more probably in the realm of contentment and serenity. But those are words that are not in common use. People sort of use happiness as almost as a synonym for those things. But yeah, I agree. The goal here is not, you know, a constant state of positive emotions and the relative absence of negative emotions. It's going to be more in the realm of that peace that surpasses all understanding. If you sort of want to swipe a phrase from the New Testament, it's that contentment, serenity piece.
Thank you, David. Nicole here in the chat box says, can you finish the example of how acceptance could manifest in the person with back pain or chronic back pain? Does pain not cause negative feelings?
There's pain and then there's suffering. Those are two different things. So pain is the physical sensation. Suffering is all the cognitive and emotional stuff surrounding it. It's the evaluation of the pain. And so there's ways actually of testing this. I use a few standardized tests. One is the survey of pain attitudes that looks at cognitions and emotions related to pain. And so, but that gets into the realm of suffering. Like, my life is awful because of pain. That's the evaluation. So pain is just the raw emotion. It's the evaluation of the pain that gets into the suffering, which is more of a cognitive emotional thing. I can't enjoy my life because of pain. I can't do the things I want to do because of my pain. It's all those evaluations that bring in the suffering. So I'm quick, not only with physical pain, but even emotional sort of stuff. Let's call the event what it is, or the driver what it is, but then let's be clear, what are we bringing to the table in terms of our evaluations and judgments?
Thank you. Thank you for the question, Nicole. Thank you, David. Steve asks, how is that the medical model gained and continues to have such sway over our understanding and our practice and trying to find happiness in a pill?
I don't have a great answer for that. Part of it, it's transactional. You know, if you take an antibiotic for a sore throat, if you take a proton pump inhibitor for acid reflux, I mean, you know, the medical model is trying to emulate that. It's probably not the right model. I meet every Friday actually with somebody I work with at Alina. We're partners in crime, so to speak. We were having a discussion about this, and you know, clearly some people need medications, but my goal with medications is kind of modest. If people are really dysregulated, they're distressed or impaired, that's kind of the lens that DSM-5 uses. Medications have a role in improving function and reducing distress so they can engage in the work that all of us have to do. So I don't know why. I don't have a clean answer for why we think that happiness is in a pill. I think they have a role, but I'm clear to define what it is.
Sure. Thank you, David. Thank you, Dr. Sauce. I think that was Steve throwing you a curveball here. Kirsten asks, wasn't the 1980s promoting better living through chemistry?
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I don't watch a whole lot of TV, but if you watch any TV, that's still happening. You know, you see ads for atypical antipsychotics, and you have people in these ads that look nothing like the patients I'm treating who actually need atypical antipsychotics. So yeah, you know, there's a lot of dissatisfaction that's not clinical. You know, you do a PHQ-9 on somebody and it's like 6. I mean, that's not really typically a target for medications. You do a Beck anxiety inventory and the score is low. I mean, again, that's not going to probably be a target for therapy. It's the dissatisfaction that we're talking about today that's really the target. And there's no medications for that dissatisfaction.
Sure. Thank you. So Lily asks, do we want to be mindful all day? If so, how do we feel emotions if those are driven by thoughts and meditation is non-judgmental?
Well, I don't think you can be mindful every single moment. And so this gets into a broader question about consciousness. And so there is always going to be an object of our awareness. And so sometimes the object is going to be, you know, and right now the object of my awareness is the camera in front of me and the laptop in front of me. The question is, do I always have to have an object of awareness? Can I withdraw attention and just be aware that I'm aware? That's kind of the essence of mindfulness. And so, no, you're gonna have objects of awareness. It's going to be things that you do, but then hopefully you withdraw and give yourself a break. Give yourself a mental break from all those objects of awareness, all the evaluations, judgments, etc.
Thank you. Susanna has a question here. If the wandering and unfocused mind is the miserable mind, does this mean that we should be packing our day with activities, either physical or mental or spiritual, and have no unscheduled moments?
No, that's a great question. So I think distraction is a legitimate and viable psychological tool. I mean, it's you know, you have to have a certain amount of structure to your day. So some of my patients, you know, there's absolutely no structure to their day. So sometimes we do add things to it, but that can also be unhealthy. You know, the overprogrammed person where there's just not a free moment anywhere. It's just wall to wall activity where they're just basically, there's constantly an object of awareness. That's what they're doing. They've got work, they've got leisure, they got family. No, so I don't think that strategy is a particularly healthy one. It works to a point, but when you're just running like crazy, I think it's, again, not very healthy. And really, I'm not sure that, even as you saw from the Killingsworth Gilbert study, I'm not even sure that you would be present right here, right now. Again, it's not the activity, it's what your mind is doing. You could be a very busy individual, but be very, very mindful, meaning you're always generally present. It could be the opposite. You could be a not very busy person physically, but your mind could be everywhere but here. And so, roundabout answer, but no, I would not pack your life from morning to night with activity. I don't think that is going to be very therapeutic or healthy.
Sure, thank you, thank you. Difficult concepts for sure, and thank you for the breakdown. You have time for one final question, David?
I got all the time you want.
All righty. Julie asks, would you recommend one specific biofeedback sensor for anxiety with preteens?
Ooh. So you know, the thing that's interesting, I have 2 teenagers and a 12-year-old, and the thing that's interesting, I'm just gonna exit and get back to the biosensors here, the biofeedback sensors. It sort of gamifies things, you know, and so that is one thing that is potentially, now I will tell you that Muse may not be the tool, at least for my teens. This is more of a close your eyes, meditate sort of thing. I don't think I could get my kids to do that. But I think something like this really does gamify the experience. So their eyes are open, they're seeing something on their screen, they're getting auditory feedback through their earbuds. They through breathing and breathing on a timer can control sort of the outcome. So I would say HeartMath for a teen might be the way to go, just because it gamifies things. This one might be tough again. Mindfulness meditation with your eyes closed. So my vote for a teenager would be that one, would be HeartMath.
Okay, thank you. And Kirsten added, HeartMath has been really helpful in practice and teaching teens about emotional awareness and regulating emotions. Thank you, Kirsten.
It is true. Yeah, they believe they have no control over the way they feel. I hear it all the time from my kids.
Understandable. Well, thank you all for joining us today. That is the end of our scheduled time. And on behalf of the Center for Practice Transformation, we'd like to extend an extra special thanks to Dr. David Frenz for sharing his time and talents and wisdom with us today.
Anytime, Joe.
Thank you. And that'll end our recording. Thank you very much. Have a happy Halloween and be safe. So David, anyone, if